Ambassador Trignath, do you think that this is a very, very important challenge for diplomacy now? You know, diplomats sit there and they talk about strategies and they strategize. They go back to the storyboard again and again. But today, I mean, we saw Arab Spring. We've seen several other cases where the disinformation or the misinformation, to be more precise, seems to be actually ruling the roost. So what does one do?
Well, as you know, that this is called gray zone warfare that is often used between the states and not within the country. But here, since the biggest threat to President Putin during this whole war right now has come from his own protege. This guy used to be Putin's chef, and he was brought in here essentially to fight the Ukrainians at the Blackwater forces of the Americans, which have also been deployed in Ukrainian war, and he was pretty successful. In fact, even when the Russian forces were not able to do that well, he was able to hold on to Bakhmut and kept on fighting because he has no holds barred. So, but it seemed as if he was taking an advantage over Defense Minister Shoigu and General Gerasimov, whom he has been accusing of not supporting him, not sending supplies. So he has this direct contest with the Defense Minister Shoigu. Now, of course, he had probably taken a route which was bound to fail. I mean, it was not going to succeed in any way. But at the same time, there are several oligarchs in the country who have been shutted out by Putin, and they have been working against Putin for a very long time. They are the ones, the Western intelligence is also operating, trying to work on this situation. And I find that this is a scenario which would have given him some kind of, and inside the Kremlin, there might be a grouping which would have fallen out eventually. And this fellow decided that I must go and give a point and convey to Putin that he is a better person to handle the affairs rather than Shoigu. He basically wanted Shoigu and Gerasimov, General Gerasimov, to go. And that's precisely the case because his Wagner group has been very successful in many countries. We have seen it outside also, even on the border. So he must have generated this kind of a confidence and tried to do that. And he used social media to communicate with this. But the question is essentially that what is going to happen to him? He realized
Right.
his limitations and he went back. And I mean, they are going back. He will be in exile now. Most likely in Belarus, and you don't know whether he'll survive or not. Most of these people, probably Shoigu's design was to absorb the people into the army and try to create something new, which will operate abroad. So it is a bigger game that is going on, except for the social media. That continues. One thing is for sure, that the Russians did not want to fight the Russians. I mean, this is not fighting the Ukrainians or somebody outside. It is Russians fighting against the Russians. And these people who are there in his army are also, many of them are ex-army, ex-intelligence, and people from even some of the convicts. So I think that this is, and it was a creation of Putin himself, which we call in Russia as Siloviki. The deep state in Russia is called Siloviki, and that is all security people. And they are all very close to these guys. So I think this guy Prigozhin, in my view, just overstepped and was overconfident of the kind of support that was probably promised to him. And he obviously, for the moment, failed in it.
But Ambassador, the thing is that you say, I mean, I'm very intrigued and very interested by what you're saying. He overstepped, but then there was a major chink in Putin's kind of armor. You know, there was I mean, whatever he had fortified so far, there were major gaps in it. Otherwise, they were chums, you know, they were friends, they were eating hot dogs together. I mean, we know that, you know, he has been very, very close to Putin, and suddenly, of course, it's a cliched story, you know, where the friend turns into foe, but that shows Putin up, as in that he is not an efficient administrator at all, as he was made out to be, despite Ukraine.
Well, I don't think that is a correct assessment. If you had known how Putin's mind works or how he works himself, and no emperor, leader, autocrat, or is immune from the chinks in the armor. There are your own people who see Ravan ka time pe aapne dekha that this was Vibhishan who brought him down. So there is always the case. You create a Bhasmasur, and that's what eventually going to happen. They become ambitious. There are other people. But this fellow has been giving signals for a very long time. Now, there is another thing, I mean, theory there. Shoigu, defense minister, is also slated to be in line to take over after Putin goes away. And I doubt very much that, that it could be possible to convey a message to Shoigu. We'll have to see now whether the defense minister or the generals are changed, not immediately, maybe in a short while, because Putin is not happy with the way the war has been going. You know that. I mean, he has been for the last 10 years working on creating a smart, autonomous, very important army. He has a lot of funds have been given, and it is a known fact that because of the corruption, because of misinformation given to him, he was not able to, he took the decisions that he took. And so that's a failure on his part, that his own people probably did not brief him correctly. But at the same time, I think that there is much more which is going to come now, and whether Prigozhin will continue to live, that is another very major point now, because Putin is not going to let this be played out in the public domain beyond the point. And that's precisely why he chose Belarus and Lukashenko to take the lead and convey the message and provide this guy the refuge.
Yes, what Ambassador Trivnayat is mentioning is quite true there, because the geographical positioning of Belarus and the interest that it served both, amicably for Russia and Belarus both. We have seen that since the beginning of the war also, because the international community, Poland being a NATO ally, but Belarus, on the other hand, on the other side, siding with Russia, that was very crucial. And Putin knows it very well also. In terms of, the role of Yevgeny Prigozhin, Major General Meston, help us understand here, if there is a Yevgeny Prigozhin on one side fighting the war for Putin, there is also Ramzan Kadyrov, who is one of the Chechen leaders. Now, we will touch upon in detail what Kadyrov is and what his role is till date. But from a strategic point of view, from a armed force point of view, if you could help us understand how justified it is as of now to have a private army, while you can have it to quell any uprising within your country, but when it comes to international borders, these fighters were actually have been engaged in warfare with Ukraine for a long time now, even before the official declaration of war with Ukraine. Do you believe that all the international laws or the prisoners of war and all those rules apply on these fighters, these private fighters, be it Chechen or be it the Wagner group?
There are many aspects to this question. First is how feasible it is to do strategically. Let's take the Indian model. We have never had this concept, and we can, as a soldier, if I am deployed, like I was commanding my division in Firozpur, I can't even imagine a private army functioning close to me independently, and I can understand what the army is a professional organization. They are supposed to function. It has a proper command control. It has logistics. It has intelligence. It's a large number of factors. It is not that one independent identity is placed somewhere and they start functioning independently. And also you are supposed to not support them. This is actually the whole problem, and this is where Prigozhin has also overstepped, because this actually was not a suitable, suitable deployment to use along the borders for fighting a war. It is like someone else fighting someone else's war. This war was of the Russian army, not of this Prigozhin. Now, how they should be used? I do agree that this force was created, private army. So they have to be, obviously, first is they need to be used independently. Now, where? Independently, we have so many examples. They have been used very effectively in Africa. They have changed some regimes. They have gone to Syria, and so many, we are all aware about it. I'll not dwell on that. So here, now since priority was Ukraine, they could have been used inside Ukraine. All those covert operations and everything should have been actually done by these people. Now, even coming on to the Chechen rebels, I again wonder, why should a professional army, Russian army is considered as one of the finest professional armies in the world. And from day one, I actually failed to understand how these Chechen rebels were inducted to fight along. Then the Wagner group was fighting. So this reflects something on the professional army or professionalism of the Russian army. And I luckily have operated with a number of these countries and in my appointments. So one has also been in the intelligence. So I have realized that there is a broad conceptual issue in the Western world. The decision making is left right up to the sergeants. They are very, very effective in the so-called these China and Russia. This is the biggest drawback. Like even when I was commanding my brigade in Nathula, and the Chinese were opposite me, I just found their NCOs, or similarly the NCOs in the army of Russia, their decision making and they seem to be quite ineffective. So therefore, they will only follow what the orders are given by their officers. Now, even coming on to the orders of officers. See, Prigozhin, when he overstepped this, and we'll also come to why he overstepped this question you had asked. First and foremost is why this situation has arisen. That we have to understand. See, conceptually, Putin was aware about it that he has deployed Wagner for in a particular area. Now, Putin has realized three, four important aspects. One is that this army, so-called the private army, actually delivered the best results so far in the battle. Capture of Bakhmut took a lot of time. It almost took about 8 to 10 months, but it was only done by Wagner Group. That is point one. And therefore, his
Right.
professional efficiency was seen and it reflected very bad on the performance of the Russian army.
Right.
Obviously, Russian army, especially their CGS and the defense minister, when Soledar was captured, now they knew Bakhmut is the most symbolic place which they have to capture. So therefore, what they started doing, they refused to give them ammunition in the correct manner what they should have given. So they were dividing their fighting skills, and ammunition is one of the
Yeah.
most important aspects. And because of this, what was the outcome? Outcome was he was compelled, he was forced to project his view to President Putin through social media. Now he couldn't have direct connection over there because see, every day
Let me
there is a
come.
meeting.
Yeah. So we actually we have several other questions for you, General Saab, and I'll come to you because as the day progresses and as we see the story where it goes nail biting 36 hours, I'll have to go to Ambassador Trigonayat, who's been waiting very patiently. Thank you, Ambassador, for your patience. Now, the role of Lukashenko. Now, the thing is that what one reads is, it's very intriguing here, and I keep coming back to that because it seems the man stepped in and he said, okay, this is it, you come to Belarus. Backroom parleys, calls, conference calls, meetings, etc., etc. But I come to you. All this seems very regular, very routine. What do you think was Lukashenko's role in actually suggesting that Prigozhin now takes refuge in Belarus?
See, Lukashenko is the closest ally of Putin today. Both the countries have a closest security partnership. Lukashenko had even suggested at one time to have a union with Russia, and he has stood by Putin all along. Earlier, it used to be his governorate, as you know, in the Soviet times. So, what he is the most trusted guy for him. Now, Putin himself is at the helm of affairs. Now, this man, Prigozhin, and many others like him, whom or oligarchs, whom Putin entertains, but they are not his equals. So, Putin by himself would not talk directly to this guy, and because he considered that going into public domain, what he has done and marching on to Moscow was a treason, and he had to say that. Now, at the same time, it has served two purposes. It would have also constrained both Shoigu and General Gerasimov because they have also been in the wrong, as General Meston said, not supplying arms ammunition. So Putin is watching that, and he has seen the success of this person, Prigozhin, and he only owed his loyalty to Putin. And when he social media, he said that Putin is mistaken about who is the traitor. Now, so he's again trying to convey the message the traitors are basically those people who misled Putin and continue to mislead him. So, how do you work with this person who has a dual personality in the sense he has personal ambitions? He also naturally feels that he has got the victory or whatever in Bakhmut, and has held back the American, the British, all the European and the Ukrainian forces from entering into the place. And so he has this thing. So now he cannot be just like that. So who is the person who can do that? Now, he cannot come into Russia. He will not be welcome at all, because then it will become another pillar and pole. So Putin obviously asked Lukashenko to talk to this person and asked him to withdraw immediately where it is. And he is doing it too well. Of course, Prigozhin realized his limitations. More importantly, as I said earlier, that Putin is very well entrenched in his system, and he rules that system. So he understands where, how, because he doesn't trust anyone that way. In order to, blindly go ahead and trust anybody. So that's why he would have asked this guy to negotiate. And of course, this crisis has fizzled out. But I don't think that it is over as yet, because it has, as you rightly mentioned, that it has been the biggest challenge for Putin, internal challenge, I would call it, for him. And therefore, I don't see that eventually Prigozhin will be allowed to continue. But he would have probably used Prigozhin also to convey the message to Shoigu and others in the system that behave, otherwise you're going to go.